Sometimes when you are creating test data or sample data for your application when you're in the prototype phase, it's nice to have something that looks a little more realistic, and sometimes you have some more advanced scenarios that you need to deal with. Let's mash on that.
Hello, welcome to episode 45 of the Asp.Net Monsters. Today, James is taking us through advanced GenFu.
Yes. And we're going to co-walk through this. Dave, as well as Simon and myself, this is actually how we started hanging out, I think, was working on this GenFu project. It is great to see we've got, the really cool thing that happens with community is that over time, when these things start to get used, I'm going to just pull this up here. We can actually see the community kind of coming around this package. It's kind of a neat thing to see. We have people, like, without us even asking, people are actually doing the RTM upgrade for us and everything. So this is awesome, just to see this little library grow. This was just kind of a side project, and people are starting to grab onto it. So here we go. We've got some. We did an intro already where we kind of had a look at some of the simple things that you could do, like when you had a basic class with some properties on it. For a person, it would fill in a first name and a last name, and that's cool. But sometimes there's some more advanced things that you can do, and so we wanted to kind of have a look at that today. So I've just got a simple project open. I'm just going to open code in this directory, and we will have a look at what is in this project. And right now it's not too much. I'll let this load. My computer is going so quickly. You can see here there's a little VS Code folder where we've got some our launch settings, and it exposes any of the tasks that need for our little task runner. And then we've got this program.js. We have a project.json to which I have added GenFu 1.1.1, which is our latest version at the time of the recording. And then in this program, all I've really done so far is I've added this person class, first name, last name. There's a title. There is a full name, which is just a getter property. So we're using that kind of lambda syntax where we're just returning a value. And in this case, I'm returning first name and last name. And this private property, which we can see down here, this field middle name, to which there's no public setter on it. So there's this setter method, and so that kind of complicates it. You might run into this in certain types of scenarios. It accepts a parameter, and then it will actually set the value of that parameter in to the middle name, and then that's how that would be filled in. We've got an email, we've got an age on here, we've got number of kids. There's some cool things we can do with all of these, so we're going to take a look at those. We've also got this dog class, and we just wanted to show some of the object graph construction that you can do. So we've got this public class dog, and it's got a name, and it's got an owner of type person. Okay, so let's figure some stuff out here. So we already know the basics. So if I want to do var person equals new person, and if I were to output this, I would say something like I could do person dot first name, and we can see all the cool things going. Dave, you did an episode on debugging in Visual Studio Code, so we've got a couple of things running here. VS Code is powered by this guy down here, OmniSharp. Yeah. OmniSharp, yeah, and it's doing the compilation in the background and giving us IntelliSense and all those beautiful things. So if I take that guy and I save it, I should be able to just do a .NET run. Oops, Ren is probably not going to be understood.
.NET Stimpy.
we need to do that pull request now. You realize, right?
We do.
And then we see the first name, Kayla. Okay, beautiful. So that's the basic kind of thing that we've got going on. So we've got this age property, and why don't I start by doing this? So and so is person.years old. Okay, so if I do person.age old, then that would be how one might go about just dumping the age to the console. So I'll just save this really quickly. We're going to see really quickly again that the age is, I can't hit F5 from the console. Old habits die hard. So I'll type .NET run, and we're going to see this thing run again. It's going to build it for me, and it'll say so-and-so is so many years old. Claire is 48 years old. Okay, now that's all fine and dandy, but we are dealing maybe with a population that's between the age of, maybe it's high school kids, so we're not going to have typically not a lot of 48-year-olds, so we probably want to do something like between the age of 12 and 18. So we've got a couple different ways that we can do that. The first is by saying, it all comes around through our configuration interface. So we've got a fluent syntax and a way to configure. And I'll just wait for, there we go, catch back up. So we do, we've got this alias for A, so that it's kind of a goofy thing that we did, but we just thought it would be fun to be able to say a new person or whatever. So we've added this kind of fun syntax, but we're going to configure things. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to configure the type person. And from there, we now have, it's just a generic method that kind of gives us the ability to specify properties that we want to kind of fill in. So I want to fill in, and then we've got access to, the person object, and we can say the property that I want to fill in is the age. And then we can say, here's how I want to fill it. So I'm going to say within range, and I'm going to say I've got my min and my max, so I can say 12 and 18. And this might be a little bit more interesting. Instead of var person, we did something like this. Var people is equal to list of person. Now we're going to get 25 of them. This will just be a little bit of a better sample. So I'll do this, and we'll for each around here. And I love this completion. Oh man, is this awesome or what? Hey. From the command line and everything. Okay, so now we're going to put this guy inside the for each. And what we've got is essentially we have set up that all persons that are created will have the age filled in between the age of 12 and 18. So console.write line, person, first name is person, age old. Okay, so if I save that and we head back over here, we'll just do a .NET run. Now, this is just one way that we can actually set up the bounds for age. So we have a couple other ones here, and we'll show those two in a second here. There we go. Here's everybody between the age of 17 or 12 and 18. So that's how that works, like that. Now, this is just one way. I won't execute these all because this does take a couple of minutes to, or a couple cycles to fill. But what I can do is I can say with random. And what random wants is a list or an integer or something, some kind of collection that would represent the ages that we want. And it's just going to pick randomly from that list. So what I need to do that is I need a set of ages is equal to a new list of type int. And then I'm just going to populate it. So maybe in this case, I actually want to have young adults with kids, because we've got one of the properties on there is that there's kids. So maybe I'll start at 24. How old are people nowadays when they have kids?
I think people generally start at about 38 now.
So I was really early. New list int. Oh, I do not have. What am I missing from my namespace here? Is it going to help me with that? How far can we go?
Yes. Use it right at the bottom.
Right there. Oops. There we go. And now it works. Okay, so with random is expecting that list of something, so we're going to throw in the ages. So there we go. So
with random is one of my favorite little GenFu hacks, because if you want a certain distribution of values with your random objects that you're filling, you can just describe the distribution that you want in your random list, right?
Exactly. So if I wanted to do something like number of kids equals new list, because maybe we want that to be, maybe we're trying to deal with a population. We're basically now trying to shape our data, right? We're saying, okay, most people are going to have 2 kids. Some will have 3 and some will have 4. So I'm going to say 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4.
Yep.
And now I just basically set up, did I do enough there? That was 9 different ones. So let me just add another. And just to make the math easy, I now have 70% will have 2 kids, 20% will have 3 kids, and 10% will have 4 kids. Yep. And now I can do that. So I can move on now from my with random age, and I can say dot fill the p dot number of kids, and I can say with random, and then we've got this weighted list of number of kids, and that will actually fill that out. So when we do this, we won't get an exact, because it is random. So we could get 25 people and they could all be 3 kids, because it's just a random pick out of that list. But over a larger sample size, this will actually give us a pretty good distribution. So this first name is this old and has person dot number of kids. Okay. And I've got some wrapping things set up. I know that I set up as a default here, so maybe I'll just try and reduce my, just so this is readable. Oh, not going to work, is it? I'll try it. There we go. Oh, that made it worse. Okay, hang on a second. My OCD is like kicking in hard right now. This is not good.
I think it's okay.
We'll just do a .NET run again.
Good, yeah.
Okay, so again, we'll go through the song and dance of compiling. Our inputs have been modified. There we go. And we're going to get our list. And we can see here, yeah, that's actually a pretty good distribution. Most have 2, a couple of 3s in there, and we even got a 4. So that's great. And it's between those ages. Eric is 28 years old and has 3 kids. Now, a good friend of mine, his name is Eric. He's got like 5 years to make 3 kids happen. He's not even quite engaged yet, so this is going to be good to see how well he does. I'll use this as a predictor. Okay, so those are some of those scenarios. Okay, so let me just back up here again, and I want to look at, maybe I'll remove the configuration for person just to simplify things here. And I'll take these things out, and what I will do instead is, remember I have this dog class down here. Now, dog simply has name and owner, but owner's not a base type, and there's no way that we could possibly know all of the property names that might have, a complex type that are in your object graph. We just can't do that. However, what we can do is allow you to say, now that we've got this list of person, we can do this instead. We can say configure, configure dog, right? And we can say fill d.owner, just to make this a little more readable, fill owner with random from people. And that gives us the ability to start to fill out that object graph with things that we can configure. Yeah. And this actually is really interesting, because everything that you configure ahead of this, so if we were to leave that age and number of kids configuration in on person ahead of it, those types are configured separately. So that's why we have this generic in here, so that you can configure types in your object graph as you need to, and then until you actually do var puppies equals a list of dog, then you wouldn't actually, we're not actually filling in anything, right? This is where the actual creation actually executes. So we're using any of the configuration that you've built up, and we're building the list out when you do that right there. Let's see what else we've got. We do have this other scenario where we've got a person.
Maybe
you had a question?
I'll maybe just comment a bit on that, because we could have built GenFu so that it just randomly created a person class to fill that owner property, right? Because we know the type, and we could have just went and said a.new and populated it. But one of our goals with GenFu is to try to fill data in an intelligent way. And what we're finding is that just wasn't really all that intelligent, because it's unlikely when you're wiring up an object graph like that every time you create a dog, you want a new person.
Right.
Well, maybe that's a bad example,
but maybe every time you're filling out a blog post list, you've got 3 or 4 authors that you want to use consistently, right?
So you don't want a new author every time. And at the same time, it's also hard for us to know how many authors you want us to choose from and how many we should create ahead of time to wire these up. So we thought, especially how we were using it initially, which was to pre-populate some data into a database to initialize an EF context. At least that's how I was using it. And that just wasn't very intelligent to try to do it that way. So we thought it's easier if you can just define how you're going to wire up the graph. And I think we came up with a way that's fairly straightforward to do that. It doesn't take a lot of code to give it the instructions on how to wire that up. So
right,
a bit of background on the reasoning behind the design decision there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so let's also look at a couple of other things here. So var people equals a list of person, and I do want to speak a little bit to some of that intelligence that you were talking about. So let's have a look at if we were configuring this person. We also wanted to give you the ability to kind of direct how things would be filled in. So let's say that you had something like the email address, right? p.email. Okay, so you want to fill this email, but what you want it to do is to fill it in with the person's first name and last name. Right, so let's say, for example, here I've got var domain equals Asp.Net monsters.com. That sounds like a good name for a domain. I think you're muted.
I like it.
You like the domain? Okay, good. Muted. Good. So now we have one of the overloads that we've got for fill is to take a lambda, and we can actually pass in the person, and we can say in here to the value that we're going to return is it will be p dot first name, and it will be dot p dot last name at domain. And now when we fill in the person, we've actually instructed it to use the first name and the last name of the person, and then followed by this domain, and it'll actually compose all of the emails in that way. So let me just do this really quickly. This should just be person dot first name, person dot last name, and then person dot email. We can see, I'll run this guy out. Now there's an important note here, right? Because order is kind of important for these things. So we load the class up, and help me so I don't get this wrong here, but the first name, last name, these properties need to appear in your class before the email property in order for that to wire up properly?
I don't remember.
I believe that is. I think we found this like crazy edge case where, so I'll go back to my person class. You can see here my first name and my last name appear ahead of the property email.
Yeah.
And just because we're using reflection and we're getting that list of properties, this first name property won't be set if you try and fill in email first. So it's a weird thing, and I'd like to find a way to get around it. But unfortunately, I think the one workaround that we have would actually be for you to do dot fill on the property, like to say first name. So if you don't want to reorder your properties on your class, you'd actually be able to create the filler for the first name ahead of the filler for the email, and then that would work properly. But that said, here we go. We've got all of our first names dot last names at the monsters. So you can use this cool kind of composition thing where you're actually building up interesting properties. So I've got one more quick scenario here that I can show. And that is to fill a person, but we're going to do just a little bit of a different fill. So I'm going to do full name. And if you recall, the difference with the middle name, so when the full name property has this middle name private field on it. And if you remember, we've got this public set middle name. So we've got this other thing, and this is tricky, right? Because when we're newing up an object, we don't want to be invoking methods on you.
There's no way for us to guess which ones we should be calling to do setters.
Right, and which ones are valid, and if it's going to, especially if there's something, heaven forbid if there's
side effects there.
Yeah, any side effects, right. Yeah, we wouldn't want to make that happen. So you have to explicitly tell it to fill in methods or to invoke methods as it goes. So we actually have to explicitly say configure person, and there's a method fill. Okay, so method fill, and I think we have to specify the type. So this is in this particular case, I'm trying to fill out I'm trying to invoke that method called set middle name, and it accepts a string parameter. So, I don't even think that's it. I think it's that it is a it is a string parameter, right? That's what. Yeah, I think we had to do some typing in there. I'd have to double check actually to make sure. But we, like sometimes we implement these things and then we don't look at them for a little while. So, in this particular case, we want to call set middle name, and in this we're not actually trying to invoke the method here. We're just trying to specify the method that you're trying to invoke.
Yeah, we're telling GenFu which method it is that we're going to call later when we're filling.
Exactly. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to say, well, what is the value going to be? And you could call something that generates a string. You could use one of our internal setters, or you could just say danger is my middle name. And then you can do that. We're going to get a list of person, and then we're going to dump those out to the console. So if I do one more .NET run, we'll compile it again, and we should see 25 people who live on the edge. Bang.
Nice.
Okay. Yeah.
Magic.
So
hopefully you don't need that, but if you're working with people who used to be Java developers, it might come up often.
Yeah, we don't tend to have. I think this actually came out of an early, maybe an early issue on our original. We had this library before we called it GenFu. Yeah, somebody asked for it for setter methods, and so this was kind of the workaround that we came up with. And this is kind of akin to. I would imagine this is kind of akin to the is any or whatever, like the.
Yeah, when you're setting up mocks, right?
Yeah, it is any or whatever, so we're just trying to basically select the method because we need to select the particular overload. You might have 4 different set middle names. We need a signature that we can match and things like that. So that's how we came up with it. But there we go. There are some more advanced scenarios for filling in generated data to make your test data, your sample data for your prototypes a little bit more realistic.
Very cool. Thanks, James.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.